The Scammer's Confession, Chapter 1. The shock hook and the trap is set. Was it love, or was it a beautiful, calculated lie? That's the question that's been carving a canyon in my soul for the last 2 weeks, an abyss I'm teetering on the edge of tonight. Look at me. Avery Hayes, the woman who was supposed to be celebrating her engagement party on this very night. Instead, I'm sitting in the back of a black sedan, not in a shimmering gown, but in a dress that screams effortlessly chic, while hiding a piece of technology that could send the man I love to prison. Is there any lower form of betrayal than weaponizing intimacy? Is there any hell hotter than the one I'm about to walk into? Knowing that the only way to save my family's legacy is to destroy the man who promised me a future. This isn't a fairy tale, folks. This is the truth, raw and uncut, the kind of truth they scrub from the glossy headlines. This is the story of how I had to turn the man I was going to marry, Julian Vance, into a convicted felon. And why? Because he's allegedly stolen $8 million from the company my great-grandfather built with his bare hands, the company that puts food on the tables of hundreds of families, including mine. The audacity of it. The sheer cold-blooded audacity of pretending to plan the seating chart for our wedding while systematically bleeding my family dry. Before we dive deeper into this opulent swamp of deceit, let me set the stage. Not just for the story, but for what this channel is all about. You're not just listening to a story. You're stepping into the shadows of the elite, the places where money and power meet malice. You're here, with me, behind the velvet ropes of the rich and the ruined. This is Behind Closed Doors, your exclusive pass to the scandals, the betrayals, and the brutal reckonings of those who thought they were untouchable. If you want the truth, the kind that hits you like a shot of cold bourbon, then hit that subscribe button right now and ring the notification bell. You don't want to miss a single chapter of this saga. Tonight we start with a title that still makes my hands shake. The Scammer's Confession. Tonight, the title of my play is The Final Performance. I am the lead actress, and the Oscar for Best Deception is on the line. I'm waiting for Julian at the Belvedere Room, a place we chose for our engagement celebration, a place now soaked in a chilling, tragic irony. Inside my elegant clutch sits the power button for the micro recorder, the one a retired cybersecurity expert, my unlikely, expensive ally, taped to my torso only an hour ago. He called it the truth serum and gave me the script. Get him to confess. Get him to detail the scheme. No small talk. No I love yous. Just the brutal facts, cloaked in the guise of desperation. My heart is a frantic, caged bird inside my ribs, beating a frantic rhythm against the metallic shell of the wire. I remember the expert's words, his low, calm voice, a sharp contrast to my internal chaos. He's smart, Miss Hayes. A sophisticated scammer doesn't crumble easily. He's built this defense like a fortress. You have to find the tiny hairline fracture, the one weakness he can't fake. Push the moral issue, not the financial one. Make it about you and him. Julian. Even the name is a piece of art. Smooth, classic, utterly charming. He's the son of Senator Alistair Thorne, a man who operates in the stratosphere of power and influence. Julian grew up surrounded by the kind of money that buys silence and immunity. He was my handsome, devastating fiancé, the one who looked at me not just with desire, but with a terrifying depth of understanding. I thought he was my soulmate. Now I see that depth as a calculated study, a reconnaissance mission into the weak points of my family's corporation. The evidence compiled by my father's forensic team is irrefutable. A web of shell companies, phantom invoices, and perfectly timed transfers. Julian had meticulously arranged it so that legally, retrieving the funds would take years, possibly bankrupting us first. He didn't just steal the money, he poisoned the well. The car stops. The valet recognizes me immediately, a wide, practiced smile plastered on his face. He knows who I am. He knows the Hayes name. He doesn't know the icy fear that has seized my limbs. I take a deep breath, stepping onto the polished granite sidewalk. The air is cool, but my palms are sweating. This is it. The setup. The trap is set. I walk into the restaurant. The Belvedere room is all hushed elegance, dimly lit by sconces that cast a golden, seductive glow. Julian is already there, at our favorite banquette, looking absolutely breathtaking in a bespoke dark suit. He rises as I approach, his movements fluid, his eyes, those intense, moss-green eyes, crinkling at the corners as he smiles. A genuine smile, or a perfectly rehearsed one? That is the question that threatens to unravel me completely. Avery, you look incredible, he says, his voice a low melodic rumble, the sound that used to make every muscle in my body relax. Don't fall for the charm, Avery. It's the sugar coating on the cyanide pill. I silently command myself. Thank you, Julian, I reply, pulling back ever so slightly from his customary kiss, opting instead for a brief professional brush of cheeks. I can feel the small, hard outline of the recorder under my dress, a constant physical reminder of the stakes. The tension is a live current between us, a stark contrast to the soft jazz playing in the background. We sit. He orders champagne, the celebratory kind. I refuse it. I need my head clear tonight, Julian. We need to talk about something serious. His smile flickers, replaced by a look of controlled concern. The master of deflection has taken the stage. Avery, darling, what is it? Did something happen with your father's business? I told you I can help. Let me look at those accounts again. My expertise is exactly what... Stop. I cut him off, my voice dangerously calm, the practiced calm of someone standing at a cliff's edge. Stop playing the white knight. It's over, Julian. The pretending. The games. I know about the $8 million. I know about the phantom companies. I know everything. The silence that follows is not just the absence of sound, it's a living entity, heavy and suffocating. I study his face, every subtle twitch, every shadow of a reaction. The power of silence is a brutal weapon in this moment. He doesn't panic. He doesn't deny it immediately. He simply stares at me, those green eyes now cool and hard like polished jade. He takes a slow, deliberate sip of water. He's assessing, calculating. This isn't the face of a lover caught cheating. It's the face of a highly competent operative whose mission has been compromised. Avery, he finally says, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper, one that barely carries over the music. I truly don't know what you're talking about. Are you feeling all right? I know the pressure on your father right now is immense. It must be affecting you. Are you sure you're not projecting? Gaslighting. The familiar, subtle twist of the knife. He's attempting to make me doubt the forensic reports, the irrefutable data, and my own sanity. This is where I pivot, exactly as my expert advised. I can't appeal to his guilt over the money. I have to attack the foundation of our relationship, the thing he's been using as cover. Don't do that. Don't manipulate me, I whisper back, leaning forward, making this a raw, intimate confession. It's not about the money, Julian, not anymore. It's about us. You looked into my eyes. You put that ring on my finger, and you knew you were destroying my family. I need to understand. I need to know why you did this to me. My voice cracks, and the sound is genuine, born from a sorrow so deep it feels structural. This isn't acting. This is the dramatic language of genuine grief. I employ the moral dichotomy. Was I just a mark? Was our love just a sophisticated tool for corporate espionage? Look at this room, Julian. The crystal, the velvet, the sheer excessive luxury. My father worked 30 years to afford this life, to pay his employees, to build a name. And you were going to take it all away in a few keystrokes. I thought you were better than that. I thought you were my person. Tell me the truth, Julian. Was this whole engagement just a cover? I watch a muscle tick in his jaw. My words have found the hairline fracture. He runs a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair, a rare moment of disarray. He doesn't answer the question about the money. He answers the question about me. No, Avery, never. That's the most twisted part of it. I love you. I do. But you're right. It's all connected. The money, the scheme, everything. He glances around nervously, his sophisticated composure finally eroding. His eyes lock onto mine, and there is a flicker of something new, something raw, genuine fear, and something that looks like an appeal for help. The audience is now my confidant. I want to tell you, my friends, that I felt nothing but cold resolve. But that's a lie. The sheer physical weight of his admission almost made me abort the mission. He leans in further, his voice a barely audible hiss. I can't give you the details on the 8 million. Not here. Not now. Because it's not the end of the story, Avery. It's the beginning. And it's not my story. I was a puppet, a facilitator. I was running a small scam to cover up a colossal one. The money you lost? It was insurance. Distraction. My internal monologue is screaming. Distraction? Insurance. The plot thickens, black and noxious. I keep my expression neutral, pushing him gently but firmly. Who, Julian? Who is the director of this play? Who is powerful enough to use the heir to the Vance fortune as a shield? He hesitates, his eyes darting to the door, to the waiter, to every shadow in the room. He is trembling, and this time, I know the emotion is not feigned. This is not the arrogance of the scammer, it's the terror of the threatened. It's not me, Avery, he finally confesses, the words tearing out of him like shrapnel. I'm not the scammer, I'm just the sacrificial lamb. It's him, my father, Senator Alistair Thorne. The $8 million was a tactical loss, a distraction from a network of money laundering and political manipulation that makes your father's company look like a corner lemonade stand. He was using me, Avery. He was using us. He set me up to fail, to take the fall for a fraction of what he was moving. He needed a clean scapegoat, and he chose his own son. Twist 1. The target shifts. The confession I planned for, Julian admitting his guilt, has been replaced by something far more explosive. Julian confessing his father's guilt. The wire against my skin suddenly feels like it's connected to a power grid, surging with a terrifying new potential. The focus has shifted from an $8 million corporate fraud to a multi-million-dollar network of political corruption orchestrated by one of the country's most powerful men. The stakes have not just doubled, they've gone supernova. He wanted to ruin your father? Yes, Julian whispers, his breath ragged. But not just for the money. Your father testified against him 10 years ago in a minor ethics case. This was always about a slow, surgical, spectacular revenge. I was supposed to be the weapon. I was supposed to marry you, gain control, and then systematically dismantle the company, all while my father's real work, the Dark Empire, went unnoticed. He closes his eyes for a moment, a look of profound, devastating defeat on his face. The imagery is stark. The golden opulence of the room is the perfect, glittering stage for this ugly truth. I tried to get out. When I met you, I really, truly tried to stop it. But you don't get out of my father's plans. You only comply or disappear. Everything, Avery. Everything I did. The shell corporations. The transfers. It was all a desperate, flawed attempt to slow down his plan, to buy us time, hoping I could find an angle. I failed. I know. But listen to me. I have the proof. The real proof. He reaches into the inner pocket of his bespoke jacket, his hand trembling slightly. He doesn't pull out a gun or a knife or a legal document. He pulls out a sleek black USB drive. "This is everything," he says, pressing the small device into my palm. The plastic is cool against my skin. The transactions, the shell accounts, the emails, the voice recordings of his political deals, all of it. The real crime, the one he's been covering up for 2 decades. I copied it last week. Take it. Use it. Ruin him, Avery. You'll save your father's company, and you'll save me from becoming him. I look down at the USB drive in my hand, then back into Julian's eyes. They are clear now, free of the practiced deception, filled only with the exhaustion of a man who has carried a toxic secret for too long. My heart, the frantic, caged bird, has calmed its beating. A cold, determined clarity has taken over. My original mission was to prove Julian was a scammer. The new mission? To expose the criminal empire of Senator Alistair Thorne. The wire is still pressed against my ribs. It recorded Julian's every word. It's a confession, but not the one I expected. It's a complete reversal. Julian is not the villain. He's the reluctant witness. He's the pawn, desperate to become an agent of his own freedom. My internal monologue shifts from fear to strategic calculation. I can't turn this over to the police. Not yet. They'll bury Julian's confession under the weight of Alistair Thorne's political machine. This is bigger than the 8 million. This is a chance to fell a giant. I slip the USB into my clutch, next to the recorder. I look at Julian, and a new kind of look crosses my face. Not one of love, not one of hate, but one of professional assessment. Competence porn is now engaged. I am no longer the victim. I am the hunter. If this is true, Julian, I say, my voice steady, then you've just done the one decent thing you could do. You've given me a weapon. Now, we use it. But you have to disappear. You have to be gone. Tonight. He shakes his head. No, I can't disappear. That will only confirm his suspicions. He needs to think I'm still running the scam, still acting as his shield. I'm the target, Avery. I need to stay right here, in the crosshairs, and play the role of your disgraced fiancé. You need to use that drive. You need to use the evidence. And if you're going to survive this, if we're going to bring down a senator, you and I have to act like the most committed, desperately in-love couple in the city. He will never suspect the couple he tried to destroy is the one about to tear down his empire. I stare at the man who was supposed to be my husband, the man who was supposed to be my ruin, and realize that we are now allies. An unlikely, deeply compromised, yet perfectly positioned alliance. The final performance isn't over. The curtain has just been raised on Act 2. The $8 million scam was a distraction. The real game has begun. My betrayal has turned into a shield. The trap I set for Julian has become the key to the senator's cell. I reach across the table, not for a romantic gesture, but for a co-conspirator's handshake, and instead, I let my hand rest briefly, deliberately, on his. You're either the greatest liar I've ever known, Julian Vance, I whisper, my eyes holding his steady, or you're the one person who can save my family. Either way, the game is on. We fight back. Together. The fear is still there. Yes, but it's now laced with a thrilling, terrifying sense of purpose. I'm in too deep to look back. My moral test is over. The moral battle for the soul of a city has just begun. Now, my friends, you have the hook. You have the shift. You have the stakes. Don't go anywhere. You need to see how Avery Hayes, the supposed victim, becomes the architect of a senator's downfall. Make sure you're subscribed to Behind Closed Doors and that bell is ringing. The next chapter will detail the contents of that USB and how we found our unlikely expert, the one who set me up to be a surveillance asset. You won't believe the depth of the rabbit hole. The evidence of the real crime is coming soon. Chapter 2. The Personal Moral Test. He left. Just like that, after pressing the USB, the black heart of a senator's entire criminal operation, into my hand, Julian Vance, the man I was still supposed to be marrying, simply stood up, paid the astronomical bill for the champagne we hadn't touched, and walked out. The abruptness of his exit was the final devastating flourish of his performance. It wasn't the triumphant departure of a victorious conman. It was the hollow, terrified flight of a soldier abandoning his post. I sat there, alone in the golden glow of the Belvedere room, the silence finally descending like a shroud. The jazz played on, oblivious to the fact that the moral foundation of my entire life had just been shattered, then hastily reconstructed with entirely new, much more dangerous materials. I reached into my clutch and touched the smooth casing of the USB, then the hard ridge of the tiny recorder taped to my torso. The recorder, initially meant to be Julian's undoing, was now the smoking gun against his father. The irony of the situation tasted like ash and cheap perfume. Julian is not the scammer. He is the victim. He is the reluctant witness. He is telling the truth. This was my personal moral test. The evidence against Julian regarding the $8 million was solid. He facilitated the loss. He was complicit. But his confession, his terrified, desperate plea about his father, Senator Alistair Thorne, pointed to a truth so much larger and uglier. If I turned in Julian, I'd reclaim the money, but I'd let a powerful, truly corrupt man walk free. If I protected Julian and used his evidence, I'd be inviting a political firestorm and putting both of our lives in unimaginable danger, all while aligning myself with the very man I had intended to betray. Which betrayal was the greater sin? The calculated financial crime against my family, or the moral crime of letting true evil thrive? I pulled my phone out, my fingers trembling as I quickly messaged my hired cybersecurity expert Max. Change of plans. Target neutralized. New target, Alistair Thorne. Meet me at the safe location ASAP. Bring your heavy artillery. The waiter returned, offering coffee. I accepted, needing the sharp, bitter taste to cut through the haze of shock. My mind was now running on a cold, strategic track, every emotion boxed away. I had to go back over our exchange, to scrutinize the subtext, to determine if Julian was a master manipulator crafting the ultimate lie, blaming his untouchable father, or if he was truly broken. I recalled his physical reaction, the way his hand shook as he reached for the drive, the raw fear in his eyes, the total lack of his usual arrogance. A masterful scammer never breaks character. Julian had fractured completely. He hadn't tried to save himself. He had handed me the tool to destroy the one person who could protect him. That, more than anything else, was the proof. A son does not betray his father's empire simply to save a few years in prison. He does it to save his soul. This new reality forced an immediate, terrifying realization. Julian had been playing the role of my fiancé for months, enduring an emotional proximity that must have been agonizing. He must have seen the genuine love in my eyes, the simple trust of my father, and the sheer decency of our family, and it must have activated some flicker of humanity within him. Kicking in the door of my heart was just a means to an end for Senator Thorne, but for Julian, it became a point of no return. He used gaslighting on me earlier tonight. He tried to make me doubt myself. But when I pushed the emotional core, the us, he broke. He confessed the whole thing, not to save his skin, but to condemn his father. As I sat there, savoring the bitter coffee, I felt the first stirring of compassion, A dangerous, confusing emotion for a woman who was supposed to be seeking vengeance. I had imagined him as a slick, greedy villain. Now I saw him as a prisoner of his own lineage, a man so deeply controlled that the only path to freedom involved handing his father's head on a platter to the woman he was supposed to ruin. I played the scene back in my head, the way his voice dropped when he said, "I'm not the scammer. I'm just the sacrificial lamb." The weight of those words. Senator Thorne hadn't just intended to ruin my father's company. He intended to ruin Julian's future, ensuring that if the $8 million scam ever came to light, his own son would be the convenient fall guy, the Chekhov's gun ready to explode. The small crime was meant to shield the giant one. The sheer calculated evil of Senator Thorne solidified my resolve. My father's money was important, but this was about something far bigger. Justice against a power that believed itself to be above the law. I felt a surge of competence porn, the intoxicating rush of knowing I had moved past the role of a wronged fiancé and into the role of a strategist, a player in a game with stakes that included political dynasties and national security. I finished the coffee, my hands steady now. My phone buzzed, a text from Julian. I hadn't expected to hear from him so soon. Julian. He knows I've been acting erratically. I'll be flying to the family compound tomorrow for a heart-to-heart. He's testing me. Don't contact me. But know this, Avery. I meant what I said. Every single word. And for the first time in my life, I feel clean. Use the drive. This confirmed my decision. Julian was putting himself back in the line of fire, using himself as the bait, so I could have time to analyze the drive and make my move. He wasn't running. He was actively positioning himself to be monitored by his father, thereby drawing all attention away from me. He's a good man trapped in a bad man's role. Or perhaps he was just a desperate man finally choosing the light. It didn't matter. What mattered was the evidence he gave me. I stood up, leaving the pristine table behind. The beautiful, opulent restaurant, the perfect stage for a lavish engagement and an ugly confession, was now just another room. As I walked out, I didn't feel like a broken woman, nor did I feel like a vengeful one. I felt like a general, armed with a powerful new weapon and a terrifying new mission. I got into the waiting car. The USB drive clutched so tightly my knuckles were white. The path was clear now. The $8 million was collateral damage. The real enemy was Alistair Thorne. The stakes were no longer a company bailout. They were an international conspiracy. The thought of working with Julian, of having to pretend to still love him, to still be planning a wedding, to deceive the most powerful man in the state. It's overwhelming. But I choose this. I choose the dangerous path to true justice over the easy path to partial recovery. I looked out the window as the city lights blurred. The confession I had planned for never happened. Julian Vance was supposed to admit to corporate fraud. Instead, he confessed to being a pawn in a far greater, far more sinister political game, implicating the most powerful man I knew. The target has shifted. The hunt for the corporate scammer is over. The war against the political mastermind has just begun. Next time, my friends, we dive into the data, we'll meet Max, the cybersecurity guru, who'll help me unlock the secrets of that USB drive. Get ready to see the true cost of power. If you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button on Behind Closed Doors and make sure you ring the bell so you don't miss the shocking contents of the drive. The next chapter is appropriately titled, The Evidence of the Real Crime. I promise, the truth is far more terrifying than the lie. Are you ready to see what a senator is truly capable of? Chapter 3. The Evidence of the Real Crime. The sedan was a velvet cage, speeding through the glittering darkness of the city, but my world was suddenly blindingly bright with terrifying clarity. Julian's confession, The desperate, self-sacrificing act of a son against his father had ripped the elegant facade off my reality. I wasn't just dealing with corporate fraud anymore. I was holding the key to a political dynasty's demise. I clutched the USB drive, its cold, hard edges digging into my palm, a tangible manifestation of the immense danger I now embraced. This little piece of plastic was no longer just evidence. It was a target painted on my back. My destination was not home, but a nondescript industrial chic loft near the docks. Max's safe house and operational hub. Max, my cybersecurity expert, was the kind of man who communicated mostly through code and distrust. He was my unlikely, expensive ally, a retired NSA analyst who now specialized in making wealthy people's secrets disappear or, in my case, become damningly visible. He was my only lifeboat in this sea of elite deception. When I arrived, Max was already set up, bathed in the eerie blue light of 3 large monitors, his expression an unreadable mask of intense focus. He looked up, his eyes immediately drawn to my face, then to the USB in my hand. He knew the mission had gone sideways before I even spoke. "The wire?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly, cutting straight to the procedural. "It recorded everything," I confirmed, pulling it off. The adhesive felt like ripping a piece of skin away. But the target shifted. Julian wasn't the final boss. Senator Thorne is. This is the real evidence. I pushed the USB drive across the table. He gave it to me, his insurance policy. Max picked it up, treating it with the reverence one gives a live grenade. Competence porn 2. Data analysis began immediately. He inserted the drive into an air-gapped terminal, a computer not connected to any external network, to prevent any digital fingerprinting or remote destruction. The silence returned, thick with the whirring of hard drives and the soft clicking of Max's keyboard. I watched him work, his fingers dancing across the keys with an almost surgical precision, bypassing layers of sophisticated encryption. He wasn't just breaking a password. He was peeling back the carefully constructed digital identity of a powerful man. Then, the data spilled out onto the screens. I braced myself for financial spreadsheets, but what materialized was far more complex and sickening. "It's not just a ledger, Avery," Max murmured, pointing to a screen glowing with charts and interconnected nodes. "It's a complete ecosystem. Look here. Money laundering, multi-jurisdictional. He's been running hundreds of millions through a network of holding companies in the Cayman Islands, BVI, Panama, for 2 decades. The detail shock detail, hit me like a physical blow. The $8 million Julian stole from my father's company was less than the senator's monthly operating budget for his dark network. That money had simply been noise, a strategically loud, distracting scandal to cover a much larger, more silent crime. Max scrolled down, opening files labeled with cryptic initials and dates. These are emails, communications with foreign officials, lobbyists, and what looks like organized crime figures. He's not just manipulating politics, he's manipulating markets. He opened a series of audio files. The first one played, a familiar, smooth baritone filling the room. Senator Alistair Thorne. "The zoning vote on the waterfront property must fail. If it passes, the valuation of the adjacent land, the land held by Patriot Trust, plummets. You need to ensure 3 specific committee members develop sudden, urgent family emergencies. Use the usual channels. Make the solution compelling." I leaned forward, my stomach churning, the sheer audacity of his power, laid bare by his own voice. He wasn't just rigging elections, he was weaponizing local politics for massive, undisclosed real estate gains. He was moving chess pieces that destroyed whole neighborhoods for his own profit. "This is not just fraud, Avery," Max said, turning to me, his serious face now etched with genuine concern. "This is racketeering, political corruption, and possibly treason, depending on who Patriot Trust is really working for. You were going after a mosquito. Julian just handed you the key to the nest of vipers. I looked at the data, a digital map of a hidden empire. My goal instantly shifted from recovering funds to dismantling power. The $8 million had vanished into this swamp, a negligible, unrecoverable sum. The money no longer mattered. The moral clarity was absolute. I had to bring this man down. We need to protect Julian, I stated, the realization solidifying my intent. He's the only one who can testify to the internal structure. He's the missing piece. He's the only reason his father's scheme, the irony, is about to collapse. Max nodded grimly. Julian is the inside baseball. He knows the code names, the dead drops, the whole dirty infrastructure. But by giving you this drive, he's signed his own death warrant. His father will figure out the moment Julian goes silent or acts against him. We need to turn him into an untouchable, protected witness before Alistair Thorne can neutralize him. The stakes tongue-vote. Stakes are skyrocketing. I was no longer an executive trying to save a company. I was now the guardian of a federal witness and the custodian of evidence that could destabilize high-level politics. The elegant comfort of my privileged life had evaporated. I was operating in the shadows, fighting a ghost in a bespoke suit who controlled judges and federal agents. "What's the plan, Max?" I asked, my voice steady. The fear was still a dull throb, but it was being drowned out by the adrenaline of the fight. Max pointed to the screen, where the image of Senator Thorne smiling confidently at a press conference was juxtaposed with a chart detailing illegal stock manipulation. "We don't go to the FBI or SEC yet. The senator owns people inside those walls. We compile a bulletproof case, use Julian as the mule to gather one final, public piece of evidence, and then we flood the zone, simultaneously releasing the data to trusted journalists, a few clean federal agents, and perhaps a special prosecutor. We have to make it too big to bury." He scrolled to a specific transaction, a massive wire transfer scheduled for the end of the week. "Julian told you he was flying to the family compound tomorrow for a heart-to-heart. That's not a check-in. That's a meeting about this transfer. The wire we see here is the final phase of a massive acquisition. This meeting is where the senator will likely discuss the final steps, who gets paid and how to clean the money. This is our target." I thought of Julian's text. He's testing me. He was walking into the lion's den. I had to ensure he walked out with the final damning recording. Julian and I have to maintain the relationship, I realized, the plan taking shape in my mind. The engagement must continue. Senator Thorne must believe Julian is still the desperate, broken man he can control, still the shield against the $8 million scandal. We have to be the perfect, loving, troubled couple. The irony of having to feign love to save a life was a heavy burden to bear. Max simply stared at me, his gaze analytical. "You're signing up for a high-wire act, Avery. One slip, one wrong word, and the senator will know. He's a monster, and he'll come for you, and he'll come for Julian. You're no longer just trying to save your father's business. You're trying to save a country from a deeply corrupt politician." I looked at the screen, the detailed, damning map of Alistair Thorne's empire, and felt a fierce, cold surge of resolution. I wasn't the same woman who walked into that restaurant tonight. The victim was gone. The strategist remained. "I have the proof, Max. Julian gave me the sword. Now, we use it to cut the head off the serpent," I declared, my voice steady, reflecting the steel I now found within myself. I had to protect Julian, not out of love, but because he was essential to justice. My path was set. My war for my family's survival had evolved into a political assassination. This is how quickly the game can change, my friends. I started this journey seeking vengeance for $8 million, And now I hold evidence that can topple a senator and expose a criminal network spanning 2 decades. The luxury and security I knew were an illusion. The real world is played out in codes and secrets, just like on this channel, behind closed doors. Don't miss what happens next. The plan to infiltrate the senator's inner circle, the desperate rehearsal of my role as Julian's loving fiancé, and the meeting that could change everything. Subscribe now and ring the notification bell, because the next chapter is pure strategy and dangerous co-conspiracy, the PI's plan, and the unlikely alliance. Are you ready for the deep dive? Chapter 4. The PI's plan and the unlikely alliance. The safe house quickly became our war room. For the next 36 hours, Max and I lived on cold coffee and the harsh, unrelenting glare of the monitors. The sheer volume of data Julian had handed over was staggering, a testament to the scope and longevity of Senator Thorne's depravity. We weren't just looking at transactions, we were seeing the detailed architecture of his criminal life. Max, with his detached surgical focus, was the perfect counter to my white-hot fury. He confirmed what Julian had confessed. Alistair Thorne had been orchestrating scams far beyond typical political graft for 2 decades. The small-scale corporate fraud Julian was tasked with, the one that nearly bankrupted my family, was a meticulously placed sandbag, designed to absorb any minor investigation that got too close to the senator's real work. The movement of billions, the manipulation of foreign political assets, and the destruction of anyone who stood in his way. The level of calculated evil was terrifyingly consistent. "He's a predator, Avery," Max summarized, his voice flat as he pointed to a timeline that showed the collapse of a competing investment firm shortly after Thorne made a key, secret maneuver. "He doesn't just win, he annihilates. He uses his children, his staff, and his political position as expendable shields. Julian was just the latest one." The confirmation of Julian's status as a pawn ignited a complicated fusion of relief and grim resolve within me. I was relieved I hadn't wrongly imprisoned the man I loved, but I was resolved to protect him. The situation created a profound irony. I, the intended victim, was now forced to collaborate with the perpetrator of the initial crime, Julian, to expose his father, the greater criminal. My betrayal of Julian was now the foundation of our unlikely partnership. My primary focus shifted. How do we use Julian without getting him killed? Julian's last text, the one confirming his mandatory trip to the family compound, was our new intelligence. Thorne would be meeting with his son, not just to test his loyalty, but to ensure his continued silence before the final, massive wire transfer that Max had flagged. We had a narrow window. "We need a final confession, Avery," Max stated, turning from the data. "Something public, something undeniable. The evidence on the drive is circumstantial enough that Thorne could bury it in legal and political maneuvering for years. We need him to say it. We need him to confirm his involvement in this week's transfer and why he used Julian." This was the terrifying pivot. We had to use Julian as the mule, the bait, to force the senator's hand. The plan Max outlined was chillingly efficient, a perfect blend of high-tech surveillance and human psychology. The plan. The cover. Julian and I must publicly reconcile. We have to act like a couple under intense emotional stress, clinging to each other because of the corporate scandal. This will reassure Thorne that Julian is too distracted and emotionally compromised to be a threat. The bait. Julian, leveraging his knowledge of the operation and his emotional ties to his father, will arrange a critical, private meeting with Senator Thorne, ostensibly to express his desperation and beg for help regarding the $8 million fiasco. This meeting will coincide with the final pre-transfer details, the wire. Julian will wear a specialized, secure recording device that Max will provide. This device must be capable of capturing a confession even in a highly secure environment. The trap. The meeting must take place in a location where Max and I can monitor the feed, and where federal agents, whom Max has discreetly vetted and contacted, can be on standby, ready to sweep in the moment Thorne confirms his crime. The environment Max suggested? A high-end private law firm's conference room, the last place Thorne would suspect surveillance. My role was critical. I had to establish the cover story and maintain contact with Julian without being detected by Thorne's ubiquitous security. I also had to mentally prepare for the possibility that Julian might crack under the pressure, or worse, that Thorne might already suspect him and be leading him into a lethal trap. I reached out to Julian, not through text, but via a burner phone Max provided. Using coded language we quickly established. His voice, when I finally heard it, was exhausted but resolute. "I need you to come back, Julian," I instructed, my voice firm and low. "We need to put on a show. We need to look deeply in love, desperately struggling, but utterly devoted. Your father needs to see that I'm still your anchor. He needs to believe that the only thing you care about right now is saving our future." "Avery," he replied, a dry laugh catching in his throat. "I've been lying to myself and to you for months. Playing the loving fiancé will be the easiest part of this operation. It's the only performance I want to be real." The sheer sincerity in his voice was another devastating blow to my carefully constructed emotional shield. The internal monologue raged. "He's playing me. He has to be. He's a Vance." But the evidence doesn't lie. I had to choose to trust the evidence and the testimony of his terror over my lingering doubt. This was an unlikely alliance built not on love, but on a shared existential enemy. We met the next day, not at a restaurant, but at a discreet, upscale jewelry designer, the perfect cover. Julian and I spent an hour pretending to be agonizing over wedding band designs. He was brilliant. He looked at me with an intensity that, to any casual observer, would scream of deep, passionate connection. He played the part of the conflicted heir flawlessly, his face etched with worry over the scandal, the 8 million, while he was actually planning his father's downfall. "I love you, Avery," he whispered, holding my hand, the words ringing with an unsettling mix of cover and genuine feeling. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this, to save our marriage, even if it means standing up to him." The him he referred to was my father in the cover story, but in the subtext, it was Alistair Thorne. It was a terrifying, exhilarating exchange of dual meanings. That night, Julian slipped back into the safe house. Max fitted him with the specialized recording equipment, a tiny, powerful device disguised as a cufflink. We went over the script. Julian would express his fear, his desperation, and most crucially, he would ask his father, "Was it worth it, Dad? Ruining my life and Avery's just to get back at her father? Was the money truly worth this much destruction?" This would force Thorne to talk about the why, the core motive, and confirm the true scope of his actions, capturing the smoking gun confession. We rehearsed the dialogue relentlessly, the sterile safety of the safe house contrasting sharply with the mortal danger of the operation. Julian, the financial genius, was now the consummate spy. "Remember, Julian," I stressed, looking him dead in the eye, "he's a narcissist. When he thinks he's winning, he talks. Let him brag. Let him gloat. That's your victory." He nodded, the weight of his father's power clearly visible in the dark circles under his eyes. "He'll expect me to beg for forgiveness, for his protection. I'll give him that. And then, I'll take his empire with me." The stage was set. The conference room was booked. Max had his vetted contacts, a small elite task force, ready to move. Julian and I, the perfect glamorous couple, were about to walk hand in hand into the final showdown. Our in media res opening has led us here. We started with the betrayal, and now we stand on the precipice of true reckoning. Chapter 5: The Climax Performance, The three-way showdown. The air in the private conference room at the downtown law firm was refrigerated, sterile, and thick with unspoken violence. It was the perfect stage for the destruction of a dynasty, all glass, chrome, and calculated coldness. Max had chosen the location perfectly, a place of supposed legal sanctuary, where the senator would feel untouchable, and the tiny listening device in Julian's cufflink would have pristine reception. Max was in a van parked half a block away, watching and recording, with our clean FBI and SEC contacts ready to move on his signal. I sat at the long mahogany table, playing the role of the distraught, clinging fiancé. I wore a sophisticated but slightly rumpled suit, chosen to convey the sleepless nights of corporate worry. Julian sat beside me, his hand clasping mine beneath the table, a reassuring gesture that, beneath the surface, felt more like a shared shackle. He was paler than usual, his eyes holding the weary, desperate resolve of a man walking his own plank. Then, Senator Alistair Thorne arrived. He didn't enter the room, he commanded it. He was a force of nature in a bespoke suit, his silver hair impeccable, his smile a practiced, predatory gesture that didn't reach his eyes. He exuded the scent of expensive cologne and absolute power. Julian, Avery. His voice was smooth, a velvet hammer. He sat directly across from us, deliberately placing himself as the judge and executioner. I understand we are having a minor issue with this Hayes corporate fraud. You, my son, have made a rather spectacular mess. The Sung-Jot Keech Tin, dramatic conflict, ignited instantly. Dad, I didn't. Julian began, his voice shaky, playing the part of the son about to crumble. I tried to fix it. I tried to cover the transfers, but Avery's father's team found the paper trail. I'm ruined. Avery is ruined. The engagement is a disaster. I need your help. We need you to make the $8 million disappear, to pressure the board. Only you can do this. This was the hook. Julian was forcing the narrative back to the small crime, begging his father to use his influence. Senator Thorne leaned back, his eyes narrowing slightly, an expression of profound disgust washing over his features. He wasn't bothered by the crime, he was bothered by his son's incompetence in getting caught. Look at you, Julian, Thorne scoffed, his voice dripping with condescension. A grown man, a Vance, begging for scraps over a measly $8 million. You're not just a failure, Julian, you're an embarrassment. I raised you to be a titan, and you fold at the first sign of pressure from a simple corporate audit. He ignored Julian and turned to me, his smile returning, colder than ice. He picked up an envelope from the table. Avery, let's talk about solutions. Leave Julian. Walk away from this scandal. Here is a cashier's check, fully clean, for $50 million. Sign a non-disclosure agreement stating you believe Julian acted alone and were unaware of any complications. $50 million, Avery. That's 6 times what your father lost. It buys your silence, restores your family's standing, and ends this farce. Take it. Your dignity and your sanity are worth more than a failed heir. He was phoning in the confession. He was openly offering a colossal bribe, showcasing his absolute belief that everyone, including me, had a price. His offer was a loud, vulgar testament to his total power and manipulation. He was offering me an exit, believing he could buy my silence and further isolate Julian. My heart hammered, but I kept my face etched with sorrow. I played the part of the principled victim. I can't take your money, Senator. It won't fix what Julian did. Thorne laughed, a sharp, mirthless sound. Oh, my dear, naive Avery. It's not about Julian, it never was. The $8 million was my cost of doing business. It was a perfectly legitimate, low-risk tactical loss designed to distract every auditor and every regulatory eye from the real money movement this week. The funds related to the acquisition of the Energy Trust. The transfer happening Friday? That's 400 million, Avery. 400 million that is going to make me untouchable, finalize my legacy, and ensure that Julian, should he ever get ambitious, never has the financial ground to stand on. He paused, relishing the moment, basking in his own evil genius. He leaned forward, his voice a triumphant whisper meant only for us. I used Julian for the small, dirty work, the kind of things that would be easily dismissed as the folly of a rich, spoiled boy. He was the perfect plausible shield, and if he goes down for it, well, he's merely a stepping stone for my greater victory. That's the difference between a master and a failure, Julian. I built an empire. You almost ruined it over a mere $8 million. That was it. The confession. The recorded smoking gun confirming the scale, the motive, and the use of Julian. Max was screaming into his comms, ready to initiate the sweep. But then, the double twist unfolded. Julian, who had been sitting motionless, his head bowed in feigned defeat, slowly raised his head. His moss-green eyes met his father's. Not with fear, but with a sudden, devastating clarity. A clarity I hadn't seen since that initial moment in the restaurant. The pathetic, ruined air was gone, replaced by the calculating strategist I had only glimpsed. He stood up, pushing his chair back with a scrape that shattered the sterile silence. He looked down at his father, his voice ringing with newfound icy authority. "I don't think so, Dad," Julian said, his eyes blazing with the fire of emancipation. "I'm not your shield anymore. I stopped being your puppet when I gave Avery the details of the real crime. The 8 million was the bait. You're the master, but you miscalculated the devotion of your pawn." Alistair Thorne's face went white, the blood draining instantly from his cheeks. The look of utter total shock was priceless, the first crack in his impenetrable facade. "You idiot! What are you talking about? What details?" Thorne hissed, lunging slightly, his hand tightening into a fist. Then, Julian calmly raised his left hand, and with a deliberate, audible click, he pressed the button on the cufflink. "I'm talking about this, Dad," Julian said, his voice now entirely steady, utterly confident. "I'm talking about the recording device in my cufflink. And I'm talking about the second set of federal agents I brought, the ones Max had me contact. You see, Max is Avery's security expert, and I've been his secondary source since last week." The second twist. Julian wasn't just wearing Max's wire. He had established his own line of contact, his own contingency, ensuring he was protected not just by Avery's plan, but by his own desperate foresight. He had taken control of his own liberation. Before Thorne could utter another word, before the sound of the cufflink's recording confirmation could even fade, the double doors of the conference room burst open. FBI and SEC agents flooded the room, their movements sharp and immediate. "Senator Alistair Thorne, you are under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, money laundering, and obstruction of justice," the lead agent declared, the words an immediate, devastating sentence. The public climax had been reached. Thorne was hauled to his feet, his face twisted into a mask of pure, incandescent hatred directed solely at Julian. He didn't struggle, the shock too profound. He was a statue of ruin, his empire collapsing around him in a sterile conference room. I stood up, the tension finally shattering. I walked to Julian, not as a lover, but as an ally, placing my hand on his arm. He had risked everything and won. He had saved himself, and he had saved my family by choosing a path of profound, terrifying honesty. The drama had reached its peak. The senator was in custody. Julian was safe, at least for now, under federal protection. The great manipulator had been undone by his own misplaced arrogance and the quiet courage of the son he tried to destroy. The war was far from over. The legal battle would be brutal, but the crucial battle for the truth had been won. The aftermath of the three-way showdown was not a clean ending, but a volcanic eruption. Senator Alistair Thorne, the titan of politics, was taken away in handcuffs from a sterile law firm, his face a ruin of disbelief and fury. The moment the news broke, fueled by the simultaneous leak of Max's carefully curated explosive data package to trusted journalists, it devoured every news cycle. The collapse was total, immediate, and breathtakingly public. His empire didn't just crack, it pulverized. He was immediately stripped of his Senate committees. His assets, many tied up in the shady Patriot Trust accounts revealed on Julian's drive, were frozen by the SEC. The sheer damning clarity of the evidence, his own voice on the recording confessing to using Julian as a tactical loss to shield his multi-million-dollar fraud, made his defense a mockery. My father's name was completely, spectacularly cleared. The $8 million scandal was instantly demoted to a footnote in the much larger narrative of political corruption. I watched the news coverage back at the safe house. The sound turned low. The faces of the anchors were grim, the graphics stark. They were calling it the biggest political scandal of the decade. They were calling Julian a co-conspirator who had turned state's evidence, a reluctant hero who had sacrificed his father's love for the greater good. The room was quiet, lit only by the screens. Julian sat across from me, exhausted, drinking water. He wasn't celebrating. He looked like a man who had just amputated a gangrenous limb, relieved, but still in agonizing pain. He had destroyed his father and his own lineage to save his soul. The Fan Zet Kong Kai, public judgment, was delivered by the masses, swift and without mercy. The emotional toll, however, was mine to bear. I had entered this labyrinth fueled by righteous fury and a single-minded need for revenge. I wanted Julian Vance to suffer for what he did to my family. Now I felt a deep, profound sense of catharsis. But it wasn't the sweet taste of revenge. It was the liberating clarity of having chosen the greater good. I finally spoke, breaking the heavy silence. He would have destroyed you, Julian, even if you hadn't given me the drive. He set you up to take the fall for all of it. Julian nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the blank wall. I know. The moment he offered you that $50 million, that bribe, he was erasing me. He was confirming that I was worthless to him, except as a disposable asset. My only value was the silence I could buy him. When he called me an embarrassment, it hurt Avery, but it was also true. I was his puppet. I enabled his crimes. This was the core of his he qua kam xuc, emotional consequence. He had saved himself, not from a life in prison, but from a life under his father's shadow. He had traded a golden cage for a perilous freedom. You saved me too, I confessed, the words quiet but firm. I was so blinded by the financial betrayal, by the $8 million, that I was ready to ruin you without ever knowing the full truth. I was focusing on the symptom, not the cancer. You forced me to see the greater injustice. You gave me the courage to fight a senator instead of a scapegoat. This was my own moment of Thang Tai Kam Xuc, emotional cleansing. I had executed my plan, not for mere recovery or vengeance, but for moral righteousness. I hadn't succumbed to the easy, justifiable path of legal retribution against Julian. I had pivoted and chosen the high road, aligning myself with the difficult truth. The Thong Jiep Jiao Jich Rorang, clear moral message, was undeniable. We had achieved a victory of courage and truth over money and influence. The wealthy, the powerful, the seemingly untouchable can be brought down, but it requires radical honesty and the willingness to risk everything. I looked at Julian. The man who sat before me was no longer the arrogant, charming heir who proposed to me under false pretenses. He was a man who had confessed his sins, faced his father's wrath, and chosen the path of a federal witness. Our relationship, born in lies and sustained by necessity, now had a new, fragile foundation, shared peril, and mutual respect. "What happens now?" I asked, looking toward the uncertain future. "Now, the lawyers take over," Julian said, managing a faint, tired smile. "The evidence is overwhelming. My testimony ensures he won't get a plea deal. As for me, Max has arranged for my protection. I'm a federal witness, Avery. I have to go into a secure environment until the trial. I'll have a legal reckoning for the $8 million. Yes. But it won't be about greed. It will be about compliance under duress. And the senator is paying the ultimate price." He looked at me directly, his green eyes still intense. "You were right to suspect me, Avery. You were right to set the trap. And I am forever grateful that you were strong enough to recognize a greater truth when it was handed to you. You are the hero of this story, not me." "We both are," I corrected him gently. "We both broke free." The immediate danger had passed, but the long, arduous road of legal and personal consequence lay ahead. Thorne was jailed, my father was vindicated, and Julian was safe, at least from his father. But my life was fundamentally changed. The world I knew, the world of easy luxury and trust, was gone, replaced by a deep understanding of the darkness that lurks behind closed doors. The initial euphoria of Senator Thorne's arrest quickly faded, replaced by the relentless, grinding reality of federal investigation. This was the messy, procedural phase, the phase where data turns into indictments and emotional catharsis transforms into legal strategy. And this is where my true transformation, and Julian's, really took shape. We moved past the realm of adrenaline-fueled drama and into the cold, calculated world of the law. Julian, under the protection of the federal authorities, was the key. His intimate knowledge of his father's financial architecture, the very knowledge he'd once used to perpetrate the small scam, was now being weaponized for justice. We met with the prosecutors and investigators in secure, unmarked locations, reviewing the evidence from the USB drive. Procedural plausibility demanded precision. Julian detailed the purpose of every coded transaction, the exact function of each shell corporation in the Cayman Islands, and the names of the clean political operatives who funneled money for Thorne. He wasn't just a witness. He was an interpreter of a criminal empire's entire financial language. He helped the SEC place liens and seizure orders on the senator's hidden assets, effectively choking the financial life out of his defense before the trial even began. "My God, he's brilliant." That was the constant echoing refrain in my internal monologue. Julian Vance, the intended villain of my story, was operating with a competence and clarity that was awe-inspiring. He moved from the emotionally ravaged son to the most crucial, articulate asset the prosecution had. He was finally utilizing his formidable intelligence for a righteous cause. This process solidified my own power fantasy and Chuyan Hoa transformation. I was no longer the heiress desperately trying to save a failing company. I was an active, competent participant in a federal investigation. I worked alongside Max, coordinating the leak of information, timing the release of specific verifiable emails to trusted journalists to keep public pressure high and prevent any backroom political deals from derailing the case. I learned to speak the language of forensic accounting and political counterintelligence. I transformed from the wronged victim into the competent hero. The biggest shift was in my perception of Julian. I saw the why of his initial compliance. Thorne had groomed him, manipulated him, and threatened him psychologically for years. He'd weaponized Julian's loyalty and fear. The $8 million scam against my family, the initial source of my pain, was now revealed as the irony jat jia, costly irony, that saved us all. Thorne used Julian's small, demonstrable crime to mask his massive operation, yet that very act of coercion gave Julian the moral leverage and the desperation necessary to turn against him. He wanted me to be a crook, Avery, Julian explained during one of our secure debriefings, his voice now entirely devoid of bitterness, only quiet understanding. But he needed me to be a small crook, a predictable one. He never anticipated I would use the tools he gave me to fight back. He assumed the love of money was stronger than the need for freedom. He was wrong. My own character arc was defined by my choice in Chapter 2 to trust Julian's desperate truth over my justifiable rage. I chose to see the greater moral picture. That choice led directly to the vindication of my father and the dismantling of the Thorne machine. I was no longer defined by the money I had nearly lost, but by the integrity I had found. The federal prosecutor, a steely veteran named Ms. Chen, told me plainly, "Without Julian's deep technical knowledge and your relentless pursuit, Miss Hayes, this case would have collapsed into political noise. You didn't just save your company, you provided a public service. Julian may face a minimal sentence for the corporate fraud, likely probation or time served, in exchange for his full cooperation. He's the star witness." Hearing the words minimal sentence felt like another form of catharsis. Julian would pay his debt to society, but he would not be defined by his father's sins. He would be free to build a new life based on honesty, a life he had earned through profound, agonizing sacrifice. As the weeks passed, our forced alliance deepened into something real, a bond forged in the crucible of mortal danger and shared moral purpose. It wasn't the frivolous, romantic love of our engagement days. It was a deeper, more resilient connection, built on shared trauma and mutual respect for each other's competence and courage. The financial and political empire of Senator Alistair Thorne was in ruins, its secrets exposed layer by layer through the evidence I secured and the testimony Julian provided. We were the architects of this collapse, the unlikely duo that brought down a giant. The drama was over. The consequences were now being sorted. But how do you move on when your engagement party turns into a political assassination plot? How do you build a life after you've testified against your own family? That, my friends, is the question for the final chapter. The End and the Beginning. Chapter 8. Epilogue and Final Message. 6 months. 6 months is enough time for the dust to settle, for the headlines to cool, and for the consequences of a political downfall to fully take root. Senator Alistair Thorne was convicted on all major counts. The evidence, Julian's testimony, the comprehensive data from the USB drive, and the damning audio recording from the cufflink was simply too overwhelming for even his formidable legal team to overcome. He was sentenced to a lengthy term in a maximum security facility, his name forever synonymous with greed and corruption. His carefully constructed political empire was reduced to rubble. My father's company, while financially bruised by the $8 million fraud, survived. The vindication was worth more than the money. The firm was restructured, implementing all of Max's suggested security protocols. We were stronger, smarter, and infinitely more cautious. The new foundation. As for Julian and me, the end of the legal war was the beginning of our strange, resilient love story. Julian received a verdict that reflected his full cooperation and the clear coercion by his father. He was convicted of a single count of corporate fraud conspiracy, but received no prison time, instead being sentenced to a stringent 5 years of supervised probation and an enormous amount of community service. The court recognized that he was, above all, the primary victim of his father's manipulation. He could have walked away from the Hayes family, from the scandal, from me, but he didn't. Julian used the very financial genius his father had nurtured for crime, and that I had initially feared, for something purely good. He took his community service requirement to the extreme, founding a nonprofit organization called Clear Path, which focused on providing financial literacy and fraud protection to small businesses and vulnerable communities. I visited his new office, located in a modest but bright downtown building, a stark contrast to the luxurious, sterile environments he grew up in. Julian, wearing a simple button-down shirt instead of a bespoke suit, was briefing a group of recent college graduates on how to spot corporate shell games. He was teaching them to fight the very machine he'd once been forced to serve. When our eyes met across the room, there was no pretense, no subtext, only a deep, earned understanding. Our relationship was no longer about money, power, or social standing. We weren't marrying for alliances or cover stories. We were together because we had survived the worst, and because we had chosen the truth over convenience. "Your father taught me to build an empire," Julian told me later, his eyes serious as he held my hands. "But you, Avery, you taught me how to save a life. My life." The final message. We are engaged again, but this time the engagement ring isn't a symbol of a contract. It's a symbol of courage. It sits on my finger as a reminder that the path to moral clarity is often paved with frightening choices. Our story, my friends, is proof that appearances are always deceiving, especially at the highest levels of society. The most dangerous criminals are often those wearing the finest suits, and sometimes the only way to find justice is to risk everything, including your own heart. The greatest lesson I learned, and the message I want to leave with you, is this: not everyone is born a villain. Julian Vance was groomed and coerced into a role he never wanted, and his greatest act of love was not his proposal, but his confession. Sometimes, the most courageous action isn't to expose a scammer, but to help a good person find the path to confess and fight for their own freedom. I started this journey seeking vengeance for a financial crime. I ended it having found a partner, a purpose, and a fierce, unshakable belief in the power of truth. The curtain has now closed on the scammer's confession. But remember what happens behind closed doors: the secrets the elite keep, the lies they tell, and the justice they sometimes face. Thank you for listening. Keep seeking the truth, keep fighting the good fight, and never, ever underestimate the power of a single courageous confession. This concludes The Scammer's Confession. Thank you for subscribing to Behind Closed Doors. We'll be back soon with more stories from the shadows of the elite.